Hi, I'm Dr. Kathy Nickerson. Welcome again. I'm glad to have you here, and I have a really important tool to share with you today. It's actually in the form of a document, and I want to show you what it looks like and tell you where to get it, and then we're going to talk about it. So this is the tool. It's the 7 Deadly Relationship Sins and their Alternatives. So I'd like you to get a copy of this, and you can do so at my website, which is www.drkathynickerson.com. Then click on the tab that says Free Tools, and you can print a copy of this. And if you like, print it, before we go through this whole video so that you can make some notes on the document and be able to share it with your spouse and talk about it during the week. So let's get started. The origins of this document actually come from lots and lots of research. And you may have learned about me on my website that I was classically trained as a scientist. So I'm a very big believer in the scientific method. And what has been lacking from marriage counseling for a long time is the study of couples. What do couples really do? How do they really talk? How do they really interact with each other? And so to solve that, there has been some wonderful research coming out of Seattle, specifically the work of Dr. John Gottman. He is my favorite couples counselor, and primarily that's because he's a scientist. Everything he does is because he's researched couples. And so for 30 years, he's invited couples to come up to his research lab, which takes the form of an apartment, and he asks them to spend the weekend there while he and his students videotape some of their interactions and study those interactions. And from what they've learned, they've come up with this incredible body of knowledge on what real couples do to heal their relationships, what couples do to tear down their relationships. And from this, we can make some really good conclusions about what all of us need to do to keep our relationships healthy. So Dr. Gottman came up with 4 things, 4 behaviors he found absolutely destroy relationships, and he called these his 4 horsemen. He's published a lot of articles on it, and I'd encourage you to Google it and read more about him if you're curious. But from his 4 basic behaviors, I've added a couple more, because as I started to work with couples and over the years, I've found that really there are about 7 things that we do and that all of us can do from time to time that really erode our relationships. And there's 7 behaviors we have to be aware of and actively look for them when we're doing them. We have to actively try to replace them with their alternatives. So I want to walk you through those 7 deadly behaviors today and tell you about the alternatives. And what I'd encourage you to do is pick just one thing, just one deadly behavior that you can be on the lookout for this week. Look for that behavior and actively try to replace that with its alternative. If you do that, you're going to have an incredible week. You're going to notice that your partner responds to you so much differently, and I think you'll be encouraged to try the next week to replace another behavior. So let's take a look. So the first deadly sin that you want to be on the lookout for is judgment. Judgment means you making a judgment about something your spouse or partner is thinking about or doing. And so a judgment might take the form of you labeling something, like you're saying, wow, that was a really stupid idea. I can't believe you thought to do that. Or you're making a judgment about your spouse, something they're doing or saying, like, oh, I can't believe you'd think of parenting the kids like that. I can't believe you'd tell them to go to the room over that. So when you're doing that, you're really judging your spouse. And as you probably know, nobody likes to be judged. So I want you to become aware of this. And instead of judging, I want you to try to accept differences. So the alternative to judgment is accepting differences. So here's the thing. Everybody does something for a reason that makes sense to them. You just may not know it yet. So please accept differences. Please look for understanding. Try to come up with why your spouse is doing what they're doing. And if you don't understand, find a soft and gentle way to ask. You can say, help me understand that. What was it that made you do that? So that I can be on your team. Okay? So this week, see if you can replace judgment with accepting differences. Now let's talk about the next one. The second one is rejection. Rejection is so hard for all of us. You remember high school, how it felt to be rejected by somebody you cared about. Rejection really hurts people, and we can reject people in a variety of ways. We can outright reject them and say, no, I don't want to spend any time with you. Why would I want to be with you? Rejection. You can also reject them in subtler ways, right? You can just even give somebody a look and they feel rejected. So replace rejection this week with being more friendly. Try to be warmer. Really knock yourself out to show approval, to show that you love the other person, to show that you care. Even if you're not feeling 100% loved all the time, and even if you don't feel that great, push yourself. Try to be friendlier, try to be more loving, and you'll find yourself naturally replacing rejection with warmth. Good. So now let's talk about the third deadly sin. The third deadly sin is anger. And what I mean by that is acting with anger. So when you're angry, your brain is actually flooded with all sorts of chemicals that keep you in an angry mode. When you're angry, you really shouldn't try to do anything other than to calm yourself down and soothe yourself. That is by far the worst time to try to solve a relationship problem. So when you find yourself angry or feeling intense anger, take a time out. And it's really okay for you to say to your spouse, you know, I care about this, I want to talk to you, but I'm so flooded right now, I can't think straight. I can't talk about this right now. Let me calm down, and in an hour we can keep trying. What's important is for you to try to give your spouse some idea of when you're going to come back. Because if you just walk away and say, I'm taking a time out, they feel dismissed. They feel like you don't care about them. So do tell them, let's try in an hour, let's see how I'm doing then. And when you find yourself angry, do spend some time calming yourself down, and then try to come back and make requests. So making requests is the alternative to anger. Instead of being angry and making demands and being harsh and being critical, just slow yourself down and say something that's respectful, but is giving somebody a request or making a request, where you say something like, you know, I really do want to talk to you about this, but I need to take a break, and then when I come back, I want us to be in problem-solving mode. Or I'd like to know 3 things you think I can do that are going to make this better. So try making requests rather than acting out. All right, so that takes care of anger. Now let's look at number 4, and that is hurt. Like anger, when you're really hurt, again, you're not thinking particularly clearly. You're flooded with negative emotions and you just feel awful. And as we talked about before, when you're really hurt, it's a very complicated time for you to try to push through and solve relationship problems. So don't do that. The first thing you need to do is sort of heal yourself from that hurt. And the way you can do that is by doing the alternative behavior, which is asking for reassurance. So it's perfectly okay for you to say to your spouse, you know, I'm feeling really bad right now. I'm feeling really unloved and hurt, and I really wish you could say something to make me feel better. Can you tell me it's all going to be okay? So try asking for that reassurance. And sometimes what happens is people will say to me, well, I don't really want to ask for reassurance. It's like asking for somebody to give you a present for your birthday and then getting it. It doesn't mean as much. But you know what? Let go of that idea. It's much better for you to ask for what you need to feel better than just sitting there and waiting for your partner to figure it out. Because they're upset too, and they're not thinking very clearly. So ask for what you need to feel better. Don't just wait for magic and ESP to happen. You don't have to label it as a bad thing that you had to give them a hint. You both need each other to help you get out of this. So try and ask for what you need to feel better. Ask for reassurance when you need it. Okay, moving on to number 5, which is criticism. So criticism is a lot like judgment. When you are in criticism mode, you're being very particular. You're being very picky. You're being sort of harsh and critical. We don't want that. We actually want you to be a lot more friendly and a lot more accepting. Remember, none of us likes to be judged. None of us likes to be constantly evaluated. None of us wants to be criticized by our spouses. So instead, try to see your partner's perspective. Try to see where they're coming from. Like I said with judgment, you know, we know that people do things for a reason that makes sense to them. It may not make sense to you, and that's okay. If it's something that's really bothering you, do find it kind of a soft, kind way to ask your spouse about it. Just say something like, I'm really struggling to understand where you're coming from on this. Can you help me understand it? And they probably will. The softer you are with your approach, the softer their response will usually be. All right, so we're gonna try to replace criticism with seeing their perspective, and we'll see what kind of wonderful results that gets us. The 6th deadly sin is defensiveness. This is a really, really common one. In fact, most of us are defensive when we're in an argument. Defensiveness means that you kind of push back, you defend your position, you try to explain what you're doing when somebody is telling you how they feel. The problem with defensiveness is it makes the other person feel really unheard, and you also tend to be very angry and kind of short and again, kind of critical when you're being very defensive. So I want you to start, if you find that you are somebody who gets defensive, I want you to reassure yourself in those moments and also tell yourself, hey, my partner is trying to understand where I'm coming from. I'm not being attacked. I don't have to explain it. I know it feels bad right now, but I'm not going to assume that I'm in the wrong and I have to justify my perspective. You don't really. So don't worry so much about being defensive. But if you find something that you have done wrong, or you hear your spouse saying, you know, I really think that wasn't great, then I want you to try to take responsibility for it. You know, the secret to really getting out of an argument and solving it is finding something, no matter how small, you can take responsibility for. You know, maybe your spouse tripped over a pair of shoes coming down the stairs and is upset. Maybe you didn't put the shoes there. Maybe you didn't untie the laces. Maybe you didn't, you know, fill up your spouse's arms with newspapers so they couldn't see. But maybe you could say, yeah, you know, when I came down the stairs, I did see those, and I'm really sorry for not moving them then because I should have known you'd have been bringing up all the newspapers and that could have been a problem. You know, you got to think about what's most important to you here. You want to solve the argument. You want to resolve things. It's not so important to be right. You want to be loved. It's not important that you win the argument. Let go of trying to win and really work on trying to resolve things. So for our sixth one, try to take responsibility for things that you can instead of being defensive. And last but not least, we have shutting down. Shutting down is really, really common with a lot of men because I find that men feel very overwhelmed during an argument. And what's a surprise to a lot of the women I take care of is that men really have a hard time recovering from arguments. We women generally tend to recover a lot faster. Men take a couple of hours to a couple of days. So it's very, very common for men to sort of shut down and retreat and do what John Gottman calls stonewalling, where they just clam up, turn into a wall, don't respond, and just have nothing to say. So men, if you find yourselves doing that, and women too, I think there are some of us who also shut down, try to stay engaged. Try to really soothe yourself. Try to really tell yourself, all right, I can handle this. We will get through this. We're on the same team. I know it's not good if I shut down. If you really need a break, ask for a break. And again, tell them when you're going to come back. But whatever you do, don't shut your other partner out. Don't shut them down. Don't tell them you don't want to talk anymore. Don't say, it's over, I'm done. These really destroy the quality of the relationship. And so I want you to be aware of it. All right, my friends. So pick which one of these behaviors you think is most problematic for you. So look through the 7 deadly sins and pick which one you think is your go-to sin. And then this week, try to actively replace that sin with the alternative. And I promise by the end of the week, you'll find yourself feeling a lot better, feeling a lot closer to your spouse, and having a much better relationship. Thanks again, and have a great week.